Hi, I'm Charlotte Davies. I'm a sound therapist who works with motor skills, sound and vision in order to put people's senses and motor skills together in a way that they can learn efficiently. And one of the things I'd like to talk to you about is reading for meaning, because I think at the moment we're a bit lost and there's an obsession about little micro aspects of reading, and we need to understand it holistically and how the body works together in order to read at a higher level. If you have a think about humans, we've been around as we are currently for about 200,000 years, and that's a relatively short time in the history of the Earth. Of that 200,000 years, we've really been reading and writing novels since about the 14th, 15th centuries. You start seeing them both in the Far East and in Europe. That time period, you start seeing the rise of the novel. And of course, with the advent of the printing press, you get the production of books in a much larger scale. But it's only in the last 150 years we've had a concept of mass education. Really only in the last 150 years there's been a sense everybody ought to be learning to read. And I'm not even convinced of that the expectation that it's more than functional reading. Not even convinced now. And we don't really understand reading. I'm sorry, but we really don't. So I'd like to take you on a journey to get you to understand my understanding of how people develop to read, because I'm often working with adults who can't read, getting them to a state where they can read. I'm working with youngsters who really struggle to engage, getting them to a stage where they get really good grades. And getting somebody to a point of efficient learning is very different from teaching them to cope. And coping isn't nice. Coping really means you're not coping. You've got gaps where you struggle. So let's go on a journey together. So here we have my PowerPoint, which is about reading for meaning. And if we go on, we see that phonics is the first thing I go for. We have become obsessed that phonics is the answer to all your problems. Phonics, you don't really hear the full range of sounds of the English language until you're 7. That's not 4, it's 7. And 7 is much older than 4, and you need to develop the sound processing skills in order to hear phonics. And let me take you on the journey. So the first thing I say to you, if you want to be a fluent reader, is you've got to have good sound processing. The better your sound processing, the easier it is for you to develop fluent reading. And fluent reading for meaning. Sound processing isn't just hearing, it's making sense of what you hear. So that you can differentiate pitch, you can follow sound when it moves, you can hear sound in the full range of sounds that a human can process. So from 125 hertz up to about 20,000 hertz. As you get older, you're going to lose that, but you will have in your youth have developed good sound processing. You'll have used a wider range, hopefully. Your sound processing is going to be able to hear very tiny sounds and louder sounds. You're going to be able to differentiate out and block sounds you don't want to listen to, so you can pick up sound in a noisy room. There's a lot going on in sound processing, and it's quite important we check it and screen for it, which is rarely done. The kind of case studies I often see, or someone comes to me, maybe their vision when reading numbers isn't too bad, and you can see with this guy, he can see and move his eyes together when reading numbers. When he comes to read for meaning, visual dysregulation hits him. The eyes just do not work together. And he may not have any idea that's happening, just knows when he's reading, it's really hard to concentrate. Oh, it's so difficult to focus. Oh, knows things are jumping about, but not really conscious of why. For me, when I break it down, what I often find is I've got disruption on the sound processing. And in this case, the blue line, which is sound processing through air, has got some horrible dips. The bone conduction of sound processing isn't working coherently with the air conduction, and the pitch differentiation is a bit dodgy. He also has a bit of difficulty moving and following and tracking sound. So all sorts of little bits and pieces are dysregulating the sound processing. And that, when we come to read for meaning, where we need to bring together sound and vision, causes the eyes to dysregulate. So the eyes cannot send efficient messages from eye to brain. And it's quite disturbing. You're working really hard. It doesn't matter how hard you work, you're not going to be able to process. So you think that it's your fault, not that actually we need to sort out the sound processing. And sound processing is really important because it can affect global development. So when you get a problem with the sound processing, it's also going to impact on motor skills, balance, acceleration, deceleration. Might be your sense of where you are in space might be affected by it. The sound integrates with the optic nerve. So the visual nerves come into the back of the ear. Your facial nerves are also engaged because when we are socially engaging, we are integrating our sound, our vision, our facial muscles in order to empathize with people. And of course, the full range of sound and all the things it does. So our vestibular system in our inner ear impacts on global development. So sound is really important, and reading requires all our senses and motor skills to be integrated. So if sound is out, everything else is up the creek. The big problem is that about 2/3 of children under 3 get inner ear infection. It's the most common childhood infection. That then impacts on their global development. And you don't kind of notice it, you just kind of get used to everyone being not really very good. But we know from studies, and there are a lot of them, shows that the inner ear infection for the under 3s can impact on their global development, their development of speech and language. They get by, but it would be a lot better if they did more than get by. We ought to be working on developing their sound processing. As well as sound processing, which is a vital part, we need to look at motor skills. And there are 2 parts to motor skills. You've got to have postural control. So a nice upright postural control gives you the ability to sit upright, and that provides the platform for good control of your eye muscles and your 2 eyes working together. Also, we know from leading writers on speech and language, leaders in music and in drama, that good posture affects speech. It affects speech projection, and also it affects our understanding of speech. It's an important part of sound processing. So postural control is really important. The second part of motor skills control is having bilateral integration of motor skills, where left and right can work together and go across the midline without any overflow around the jaw, the neck, the shoulders. It is important for the eyes that the motor skills can midline cross, because if the motor skills can, then the eyes can develop the ability to midline cross. If you don't develop the motor skills ability, you can't develop the visual ability. So when your eyes track text, they jump at the midline. You don't want every single line you're reading to have your eyes jumping. So it's a good idea to get bilateral integration of motor skills. You also don't want, when you want to go across your midline, to have any overflow, where a person is clamping up their jaw or whatever, because they find going across their midline a struggle. It's really important, because clamping up your neck, your jaw, can compromise your sound processing. And you want the person to be able to hear and breathe properly. So motor skills are really important, but we do not have a good motor skills curriculum in Britain to check children are developing properly all the way through, so that they definitely have their feet arches rising, their postural control is properly in place. They can really work with bilateral integration. We have no proper checks. Other countries do. Not all, but quite a lot do. The result is I can go to any school website and I can find children sitting in the oddest of positions. I know this child cannot be working with both left and right sides. And that will impact on vision, it'll impact on breathing. The person cannot possibly be efficiently learning. We have known from research from the 1940s by D.B. Harmon that it is very much better to have people sitting upright, and that desks should be angled at 22 degrees, and that to be an efficient learner, you need both eyes working. There we go. So we need sound, we need motor skills, we also need binocular vision. Binocular vision means both eyes are equally strong, can move in our head, can go over the midline, can work together, and they can work together to send equal messages to our brain. It is really vital. You get those two eyes tracking the text with no jumping. We get those two eyes when they're tracking the text to be able to visualize. The brain can visualize what's being read. It can integrate what it's reading with a picture of it. So if you're reading about Peter Rabbit, you are visualizing Peter and his lettuce ears. You can visualize him getting sleepy and hiding under plant pots. If you're reading a maths problem, you can visualize the train going down the track at a different speed from the other train. You can visualize what that would mean. If you can't visualize, it's very much more difficult to understand text. It's very much more difficult to understand maths problems, etc. that you're reading. Also, one of the things that binocular vision can do is that it can pick out relevant from irrelevant. And so it can tell you what's the key part. You can quickly get through comprehension. You can quickly pick out bits you're interested in, discard the rest. When I'm looking at clients, I look at school websites, the kind of things that I see are these. So the top eyes you're seeing is somebody who has not got binocular vision. When asked to converge their eyes, one eye can come in, the other eye shoots off somewhere else. That's telling you the two eyes don't work together. They can't work together, and that we need to do something to get those eyes working together to send equal messages to the brain. What should be shocking to everybody is that this person is an adult, they've been to opticians for decades, and for decades they've paid for glasses, and nobody has ever told them they do not have binocular vision and how to do exercises to get those two eyes to work together. I can see those problems in the same sort of problems in students at Marlborough College, at Eton College, at our typical local comprehensive. Doesn't matter where you are in British society, nobody is helping you get binocular vision. People just assume it's happening by chance. It is a vital part of reading for meaning and being a fluent reader. So think about it. This development of sound is our first myelinated sense. It starts pre-birth, it matures throughout our childhood, but particularly by 7, we have the ability to process all the sounds in our language. So flashing phonics cards at 4-year-olds, I am sorry, but it's too soon, too young, and they're not ready. They can't process all the sounds in the language, and they will have to fall back on coping strategies. Coping strategies are bad learning. Let's wait, get children to really good sound processing, and then teach them to read quickly. And then what we'll find is they really do learn quickly and efficiently, and it's fun. It's not torture. Postural control and bilateral integration of motor skills also comes in at 7. It's very well established research. You haven't got good postural control, even if it's really well supported. until you are 7. We're not designed to have postural control before then, but it's supporting our whole spine, which is our nervous system, which has to map out to our whole body. And our bilateral integration of motor skills, being able to use left and right sides together really well, isn't in place till 7. Until you have your gross motor skills, you cannot possibly start mastering your fine motor skills. So wait, please. There are important gross motor skills jobs to be done, which we're currently doing badly, like making sure every child has well-developed feet, because we have far too many children with flat feet. No child should have flat feet. The thighs should turn to the right place with the arches. The legs should not be pressing down on the feet. If the feet develop properly, that's going to develop a proper support for our whole postural control. It's important when you want someone to read for meaning. Our binocular vision, we know, doesn't really come into place. To be able to confidently focus in the near range where you're beholding a book until about 8 years old. We're naturally very long-sighted as small children, and that ability to focus in the near range comes in those first 8 years, assuming everything else develops well. So there's no guarantees it's going to come in by accident. We need to make sure it does. We need to make sure the motor skills, the sound processing, and our eye muscles are properly exercised. So rushing to learn to read can block higher level learning. If we keep shoving people to sit down at 4 and start writing War and Peace, we are actually forcing them off to one side. Getting them to mimic phonics before they're ready can really make them fed up with learning. And by the time they're ready, they might have just completely turned off. Most people can be skilled learners, but we need to support them. So we need to check sound processing. We need to remediate sound processing and get the inner ear working. We need to make sure motor skills development is in place. And we need to make sure that vision is working. Just falling back on telling people it's your mindset, if you only worked harder and decoded more phonics, they're not going to be fluent readers. There's a lot more to reading. And we need to make sure the children in our country feel safe and secure, that they've got a decent diet and that they're sleeping properly. I put all the steps that you need to go through to get somebody to good stage development on YouTube that are under Fit to Learn, a whole series of videos. But if you want help, you can always come and find me. And I'm relatively easy to contact. So my name's Charlotte Davies. I work for a very small social enterprise called Fit to Learn. And we have a website and TED Talk.